With a prayer. We gather here tonight in service to the city of Nacogdoches. We are grateful to the many individuals who are employed by our city and to those citizens who volunteer in a variety of roles. As a council, make us honest stewards, and may our work tonight be blessed with insight, understanding, and wisdom. Help us to represent all members of our community and to conduct ourselves in a spirit of cooperation in deliberating matters that will impact our city today and in the future. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order of December 18th, 2018. We do not have anyone that has signed up for open forum, so we will move on to our consent agenda. And the chair will entertain a motion to approve unless someone would like to pull that for discussion for some reason or other.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as it's presented. If no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. And our regular agenda, number 5, we are going to consider an ordinance appropriating various amounts in accordance with the budget adopted for ensuing fiscal year and ending in 2019, and B, contract award to Cox Contractors for the construction of a splash pad at Maroney Park. Mr. Bray, what a fun evening.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Brian Bray, your Director of Community Services. And I really do have the honor this evening to kind of speak on some work that has been done by a group called Parks Advocacy League, or commonly referred to PAL, only because I stumble over when I say the full name. But the two items for you this evening is to consider an ordinance amendment to accept funds in the amount of $224,109 from PAL. And then the second item is for you to consider awarding of a contract to Cox Contractors in the amount of $284,109 to build a splash pad at Maroney Park. Approximately 2 years ago, PAL, which is mainly made up of everybody on the left side of our council chambers here at the moment, got together and set a goal of raising approximately $300,000 to build a splash pad that was open to the public, was free, and resided within one of our parks, and they chose Maroney Park. As you see on the map up there on the screen, it has appropriate parking. Obviously, it was the site of our former swimming pool, so there's enough water supply and sewer lines running there. And in early 2018, or maybe in the very end of 2017, they met their goal of $300,000 and approached my office and said, hey, we're ready to go. So Hannah Anderson and I in my office sat down with them, and we came up with a list, or PAL rather came up with a list of these are the things that we want to have. Here are some things that we'd kind of like to have, and then if everything works right, here's another list. It was a three-part list, and we used that as the basis to put together an RFP that we sent out to 14 individual companies. At the end of that RFP period, we had 3 of them submit proposals. Then we formed a review committee that was heavy on PAL members. We also had Angela Wiederhold from our Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. And then we also had Sherry Morgan, our CVB Executive Director. And then from the city side, we had Hannah Anderson. And that's what formed our review committee. They met, and I think it was about a 4-hour meeting. They hashed out who they wanted and ultimately chose Cox Contractors from that RFP for 2 reasons. One is they were local, and the second one is they kind of had a unique approach to the design in that it wasn't a company's item. They were pulling from various vendors. They had items from Water Odyssey, Water Play, and Rain Deck. So after they were selected, that same committee, that same group met with Cox one-on-one and hashed out the design, which brings us up here this evening. They also came up with a theme, and those of you who know Angela is also heavily involved in our Garden Capital Committee. The theme came to bugs, bees, and butterflies. And so what we have up here on the screen is this is the toddler area. Some people were asking, kind of is the scale correct? Yes, the scale is close enough anyway, because those are toddlers. One of the big items on the must-have list was seating. And so what Cox has done in this proposal is that wall acts as a barrier to keep the toddlers from running out, but primarily for the adults to sit. And it's also not in the higher water spray zone, so they're still going to get wet. I mean, I'm sure all of you have been around kids, and the 2-year-old gets soaking wet, they're going to run up and hug your leg, and now you're wet. But that's part of the joy of it. You're not having water splash on you. They also took quite a while in selecting the animals, but we ended up with a butterfly, a bee, a dragonfly, and a frog are the primary sprays there on the toddler area. And then, because it's a different company for the bigger, older kid section, when you look at that map, that oval on the upper left, that's the toddler. So you can't show both of them on the same screen because they're different graphic companies. They opted to go for lots of features instead of a primary feature. One of the early discussions was something like a lumberjack or a large bucket or the 9 flags of Nacogdoches or the old stone fort. There were lots of ideas. There would have been a splash pad with one feature because of budgetary constraints. The design and fabrication would have eaten all that up. So they decided to go with lots of features, keeping with that theme. So you have butterflies, you have flowers. One of the items that they really liked were these yellow ones. You can see right there, they're sort of opaque, but with a yellow color on them, so they cast really interesting shadows as it moves across the green and the blue. The blue is a rubberized and the green is a rubberized coating. So it's kind of like the bottom of a pool. So you don't have that, you have that slip resistant area, but also gives us the ability to do things like if down the road we wanted to paint ants crawling across the splash pad, you can go in there with a stencil and paint ants or dragonflies, what have you. So, Mayor, I would be happy to answer any questions that you and council may have. I do know that Powell would like to speak as part of the public comment section.
Thank you very much. Okay, so who would like to come first and say something? Brandy Cartwright. Good evening.
Hi. So I'm speaking on behalf, I don't think anyone else is going to come up just to save time.
Okay.
But, so I'm with the Parks Advocacy League of Nacogdoches, and it has been a very long journey, but we are just so thrilled to be at this point, and we just wanted to acknowledge the city, and working with you guys has been amazing. There was a steep learning curve for us for how stuff gets done in a city, and many of us have taken NAC 101 and tried to understand all of that stuff. And probably the biggest help in this was both our community who donated funds, and then the matching grant that we got from the Bright Foundation, which is a local organization that has been amazing and supportive. So between our community members and the Bright Foundation, we're just so excited that we got to this point. So I think that's all. We're very excited for next summer.
Okay. Well, you all have been very inspiring to us as a community. You saw a need. Our children desperately needed something done with some of our parks, and you wanted that water, and you did a phenomenal job with the smaller spray station at that park. And so 2 years ago, it was like, oh my gosh, it's going to take us 2 years to get this done, and now here we are. And so next year we will have it. And I just want to thank all of you for what you have done, not only for your own children, but for all the children and families in Nacogdoches. Is there anyone else that wanted to say something? No? Council, do you have any other questions or comments for Mr. Bray?
I just have a comment, and it's not only that they've been steadfast to the cause, but also at Maroney Park. But another example is Temple Park, away from the mainstream neighborhoods. They've done a great job over there, and I really appreciate that coming into our ward. And it was their dedication, their loving and caring for children. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Can these be done together? That we can just make a motion to approve agenda number 5 as presented, and that will cover both of it. If a council member felt so inclined to make that motion.
I'll make a motion to approve agenda item number 5 as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? from council? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Yay! Now, if you all would join me down here, we're going to have a photo with the check presentation. What do you want to do first? Let's do board members with the city. Is it right side up? Yes.
Oh, just board members first. Okay, sorry. Board members.
And y'all squeeze it.
I'm good.
Okay, yes.
All the cameras.
Two related items after another. And I'm doing, we're not doing anything. But I just have to watch out where it was. I did that.
Y'all sit down here and try it. Stand up, Taylor. Taylor, you have been here so much. Sit down right here.
I joke over here all the time. He spent more time in city council than most adults in Nacogdoches.
That's straight. No, sit down right here.
Look at the camera, guys. Straight ahead.
Do you want this to go to Brian, and then you can hang it as the representative? We will reuse it. We will take good care of it. So much That's awesome.
Fantastic. And yours?
We'll stay, but I think everyone wants to play.
Oh, how fun to have kids in the council. I like this. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 6, consider contract for water services between the City of Nacogdoches and Woden Water Supply Corporation. Mr. Bartlett, good evening.
Evening, Mayor, Council. Steve Bartlett, City Engineer. I have tonight for your consideration a contract for water services between the city and Woden Water Supply Corporation. They are not-for-profit, member-owned corporation. The city provides potable water to under a wholesale agreement to a number of purveyors that surround us pretty much in Nacogdoches County. Woden being one of those, we've provided under agreement with them since 1983. Basically, they have a single metered connection point south on Woden Road, as you would expect, where we can deliver water to them on demand, and that's what this agreement is all about and controls. Woden has typically only used this as an emergency interconnection point. When they've had loss of service, the hurricanes, sometimes they did that, and that was before they got generators on all their wells, so they struggled, and we were able to supply them enough water for that system to maintain and function. We see even lower probabilities now, probably since they have all their wells on generators for a power outage generating that. But nonetheless, it's an agreement that allows us to sell water to them under those circumstances. Some of the other purveyors that we have contracts with or contracts expiring with are Appleby Water Supply, D&M, Woodland Hills, Mud Number 1, it's a municipal utility district, Lily Grove, and Melrose as well. So we have those in place. This is one that's expired, and we're trying to revamp it. So we took this opportunity to kind of remold this whole agreement, update it, make it read with current regulations, All the numbers in there I did, which are 2 or 3 of them. All the big words Jeff did. So all the heavy lifting was done by Jeff, and I appreciate his help. It's been a lot of hours spent on this. So this has been reviewed, of course, by Jeff and also by our contract municipal attorney, Jim Matthews, who's in Austin. So he's taken a look at this and given us feedback suggestions as well. Just a couple of high points of the agreement. Basically, we will agree to deliver up to 250,000 gallons per day. If requested, they will implement a drought contingency plan when requested by the city. So in other words, if we go into drought contingency like we did in 2011, then they will follow that for the areas served by our water. So we don't oversee all their areas, but only the ones where they're using our water for it. The water use in this contract is billed the same as outside city limit customers at 1.5 times our residential rate. So that's the way this contract states. Plus, they also will pay what's a fixed monthly meter fee if they use water. So they have a 4-inch meter there, and so currently that fee would be $337 a month for the months that they use it. That's going to climb in 2020 to near $500. The rate for out-of-city limits excuse me, now at the amount that they would use, which is over 75,000 gallons if they implemented it, is $4.71 per thousand, and that will climb to $5.10 per thousand by 2020. So those rates are relatively high, which tells you this will probably always remain as an emergency interconnect just by the nature of the animal, which is, that's double what their normal residential rates are. So I think we see them using this mostly just for emergency systems. So. These agreements require that they maintain a backflow preventer on their side. We've had a lot of backflow preventer discussions lately, and so this includes that, and they will maintain and operate that. We own the meter, and we maintain and operate that and test it every 3 years, and we share test results. They have to maintain a water conservation plan, which the state requires them to do anyway, but we put it in our agreement that they have to do that and supply us with a copy of it. So they will have to have some wise water use on their side of the meter, and we don't control who they hook up or how they do it, but hopefully it'll be wisely done and meet state standards. So this agreement expires November 30th of 2025, and what we're hoping to do, if this agreement's approved with you, that we want to make this our model agreement, and we want to go back to the other purveyors with the same agreement, so we have a lot of consistency, and also all the expiration dates are the same. So it's hard for us to track these long-term agreements, and they're kind of crazy, and we're written over different time periods. So this will help kind of get us back on track. So we picked an expiration date that we can hopefully then begin cycling on maybe 5-year intervals and renew them. So after public comments, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Very good, thank you. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this tonight? Yes, Mr. Moore.
Just thought of a couple of questions while I was sitting there.
Of course, come on up.
I was wondering about the time limit of the agreement, and it looks like Steve covered that to is it every 7 years that it's, you said it's going to expire November 30th, 2025?
Yes, sir.
So when will it come up again? Will it be another 7 years or so, or?
We would propose to council to do it on a 5-year interval.
5 year, okay.
After that point in time.
Okay. Is it mandatory that we renew it at that time? Or
No.
is it optional that we?
It will always be optional at
Always
council
be
discretion.
okay. And if we had another 2011 drought situation of our own where our water was getting a little short, what would happen in that situation? Would we be? Is it mandatory that we furnish water for them if we were short on ourselves?
Let me address that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Mayor, with your permission, I'll continue to address that. Yes, this requires them to follow our drought contingency plan, which we crafted originally in 2011. We have 4 stages in that, from voluntary alternating days to water your yards, all the way to, we shut down the car washes of the world. I know that.
Yeah.
So those stages, depending on where we are and how desperate we are, would be also passed along and implemented by Woden, at least in the service area that used our water. So if we're doing alternating days, they would have to go to alternating days. We did this before when we went into stage 1 and then for a short period into stage 2. We notified all of our water purveyors, you got to go here. And so we now we can't police every yard outside the city, but yes, to answer his questions, they also have to follow it. The agreement says that we will make all attempts under all circumstances, all attempts to deliver water that are reasonable and normal. So obviously, we can break down, and obviously, we can have problems where delivery can't make it. But this agreement is intended to deliver that water, if at all possible. But we can't shut it down.
For a drought situation.
Okay, was there anyone else that wanted to speak? Okay, if not, council, questions and comments for Mr. Bartlett?
I have a question. How did you come up with the number 250,000 gallons per day?
It was actually a request. They originally requested, I think, 450,000, Jeff, was that right? 450,000 gallons as their demand, and we sat down and said, that's beyond what we're comfortable feeling that we could supply and commit to. So we sat down with them and worked out kind of some numbers that might be reasonable for them, and so I will just tell you that was an agreement just based on what they could probably survive with under a circumstance where they lost significant power or lost significant wells.
Yeah, and this would not put a burden on the well that's located in that area?
No, sir. Those all the wells pump to the south side pump station where we have some, millions of gallons of storage and pumps, and then it's redistributed through the south side of the city, Councilman, and so the network there is supplied by a number of water wells. So it wouldn't be a single water well demand for us, it would be that pump station. So yes, we were comfortable that we have a 6-inch line just heading down Wooden Road to feed this. They have a 4 on their side, and we were comfortable that at 250,000 gallons a day that we could actually make that number.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the contract, if that's what you would like to do.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda item 6, consider contract for water service between City of Nacogdoches and Woden Water Supply Corporation.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded that we approve the contract. No further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Item number 7, consider reaffirming the 2019 state priorities for the Alliance for I-69 Texas. Good evening, Mr. Jeffers.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. This is an item that you look at on an annual basis. The City of Nacogdoches is a charter member of the Alliance. You have been a member for around 25 years, and there's been significant progress. 25 years ago, it was stated that there would be no additional interstates built, and I-69 is now being built. 25 years ago, people said that we would never see the construction of I-69, and once again, now it is being built. It is being built differently than past interstates, and that is it's being built in segments. Under the old methodology, the federal government had to approve the construction of an interstate, and they would make an appropriation with the state to fund the entire construction. So you had interstates under construction from the end or the two ends, and quite an undertaking. And so this methodology is actually an idea of the Alliance, and so they have been effective. The Alliance does not pick priorities. There are other committees that do that. Actually, it's a state committee. Therefore, it's one of the reasons that the Alliance has worked as well as it has over the years. They don't squabble over getting I-69 done. They're there to secure funding, which they have done a pretty good job on the state side. On the federal side, which we'll talk about momentarily, haven't been so lucky, but that is a product of Washington politics. The other priority is to advance projects. You're all aware that in 2019, so we're only talking about 7-8 months away, the construction of the Direct Connect, a $75 million project, will be let. We're told that the construction timeline for that is 3 to 4 years. Then the other project that the city has got in the queue, we don't know about funding yet, is a reconstruct of the US 59 interchange to interstate standards and also to make it more safe. Our dues are about $5,300 a year, which is a bargain, and we have one individual who sits on the I-69 Alliance Board of Directors. Madam Mayor, I'll be happy to continue the discussion after public comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that has anything to say about this? Okay, hearing none. Council, any questions or comments for Mr. Jeffers?
Just one question. The Alliance does not pick priorities, but do they have any input as the route?
They work with the state on setting the route, and the route has been modified over the years. The original proposal showed I-69 leaving the state in the vicinity of Logansport and slipping over into whatever that other state that's next to us is called. Since then, that route is still there, but also there is a spur, for lack of a better term, that goes all the way to Texarkana. Texarkana, rightfully so and successfully so, got the state to agree to include it in the interstate construction, and they've already had a couple of projects. And there have been numerous modifications that have been made in the valley. I-69 is being touted as a relief route for I-35. And when you think about that, that's a pretty tall order. It's one of the reasons why we continue to receive funding, but also everyone wants a piece of the action. It's been said about the I-69 Nacogdoches City and County is that it will serve to be the greatest economic development engine since SFA came to town. And there are a lot of case studies throughout the nation which can prove that to be true if the city adequately prepares and plans for what is going to happen. So there's still an awful lot of work that needs to be done. But over the years, the route has changed, but the route has to be approved by the state and the federal government.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Are there any unlikely spots between us and Texarkana? Unlikely that they get developed in the short term, where it just lingers and I-69 is a...
No, there are no, when you look at the plans, there are really no plans between us and Texarkana for any additional construction. Part of that is because of the location of 259. 259 is, it's not a direct route to Texarkana, but you can travel safely on that roadway, and a lot of it drives like a interstate. Some of that will literally be probably 20 years before you see, I think, the final construction. That's a personal opinion that we'll have to see whether or not for my, let's see, Councilmember Bowden, you'll be 95. So we'll get a report. We'll get a report from the Mayor Pro Tem on that when it happens.
You'll have to read it to me because I won't be able to read at that age.
I'll take care of you, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, hearing none. So we will entertain a motion to reaffirm the 2019 state priorities.
Sure. I'll make a motion that we reaffirm the 2019 state priorities for the Alliance for I-69 Texas.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. And bless you, and agenda number 8, consider reaffirming the 2019 federal priorities for the Alliance for I-69 Texas.
Madam Mayor, this is the same presentation as what you heard on the state priorities. There is a lobbyist that the Alliance hires to work the state side. There's also a lobbyist that the Alliance hires to work the federal side. It is important to note that with the continued expansion of the Port of Houston, you're going to see a significant amount of traffic continue to increase, whether you improve the 69 footprint or not. The traffic is coming, not only leaving the Port of Houston, but also going to the Port of Houston. And Madam Mayor, I'll be happy to answer any questions after the public comment.
Okay. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this? Okay, council? Any questions or comments about the federal priorities? And if not, Chair will entertain a motion for reaffirming those.
I make a motion to approve agenda item 8, consider reaffirming 2019 federal priorities for the Alliance I-69 Texas.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. And agenda item number 9, consider adoption of Texas Municipal League Annual Legislative Program.
Madam Mayor and City Council, this is something that you do for each legislative session, and the complete program of the league is quite voluminous, and also it's very fluid. So what we do is that we tend to focus on the major points, and that is that we will oppose the erosion of self-governance, which is under a significant acute attack by the state. Also will continue to oppose unfunded mandates, and also we will support predictability and sufficient revenue to fund city operations. And once again, all these items are seem to be on the chopping block for the state. What approving the program of the league does, it allows the city to provide letters, and typically those letters come with the signature of the mayor as well as the city manager, either opposing or supporting legislation. We provide the council with copies of those letters. Also, at times, we are called to testify before the state legislature, which is a stimulating process. Sometimes they can make you cry. But one of the questions that I've been asked before, does your city council know where you are? And has your city council authorized you to speak on the item that you're talking about? So we have a tendency to ask for the approval, so we can just simply say yes. I want to emphasize that the league's program is very fluid, and the information that we provided council as well as the public, there is a significant list of legislation that may or may not happen, but all of the legislation centers around these 3 points. If there is any significant deviation from the league's program, then we bring that back to the city council. And I think this year I'll commit to you to provide updates on for the brief period that the legislature is in session, instead of waiting until it's over with and say, okay, this is what happened to us and this is what didn't happen to us. Madam Mayor, I'll be happy to continue to participate in discussion after public comment.
Is there anyone that would like to speak to this? Probably have more once the legislature gets in session. Council, any questions or comments for Mr. Jeffers?
Will you give us an example of how they've tried to erode municipal government?
A tree ordinance. We don't have a robust tree ordinance, but the governor has been a strong advocate that a city should not be able to regulate trees within their communities. And so if I want to cut down all my trees, I can cut down all my trees. Another example which I like is that the city of Denton, with an election, said that we're not going to allow any fracking wells within our city limits. And for the city of Denton, it was a safety issue. But the state said, nope, you don't get to make those type of decisions. They adopted legislation which specifically prohibited, which we had at one time. I can come up with
That's fine.
more, but
I was curious.
I'll stop there.
What about like property tax and sales taxes?
Well, that's under the category of sure, predictable, and sufficient revenue, is that the state continues via smoke and mirrors to say that there is a property tax crisis in Texas, and it's been created by local government, specifically cities and county. For someone that has been boots on the ground for 42 years, it is very obvious that the tax crisis in Texas is because of school finance, which is a state function. It's not a city function. And so the state has a tendency to look for somebody to blame, and that has been cities and counties. They've left school districts alone because they're responsible for funding, and if they reduce their funding, then that means that that's going to drive local taxes up even more. The governor has a plan to actually look at placing restrictions on school districts to increase taxes the upcoming year, and I have no idea how that might work or whether or not the legislature will approve it. While this council is fiscal conservatives and you've been very responsible with our tax rates, you never know what the needs of the city are and what the citizens might want, and that's what drives the bottom line on finances, is that we'll provide any services that the citizens are willing to pay for. We all know that our budgets are pretty tight. We have a good year every now and then, but for the most part, we tend to deny approval of a lot of needs, and wants don't even get to the chopping block. They stay over there in purgatory. So yes, it's there, and it will be. You got the governor and the lieutenant governor and the possible speaker of the House, who all have said that there will be local government tax reform, and we need to be mindful of where the problem is, and the state needs to be mindful and take care of their responsibilities. And you look at these points, what we're asking is, state, leave us alone. We're not asking really for them to give us much. There are a couple of asks in the legislative program. One of them has to do with funding of statewide fire protection efforts. But for the most part, we receive very little funding from the state, and therefore they don't need to be putting unreasonable restrictions on our ability to raise funds to provide the services that the citizens are interested in having.
I agree. They have a difficult time running the state and run city business. Scary thought.
You know what's scary? That may be the first time that you agreed with me. But actually, you were agreeing with TML, not me.
Exactly.
Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so, the chair would entertain a motion for adoption of this program. Or not.
I move that we approve agenda item number 9 to
Okay.
adopt the Texas Municipal League Annual Legislative Program.
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Are we having executive session this evening?
No, ma'am.
Okay, if not, it is now, what, 6:12, and our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending. What are you kids doing?
Oh, no, we were just making snide remarks about the state over here.
I could go on all
No, they
night.
filed a bill to make, to make sure that A&M plays UT every